Hello, today I'd like to give you an overview of a new GitHub project I set up called Clientside Analytics for Sitecore. The goal of this package and project is to make available a set of web APIs available to client applications to leverage some of Sitecore's marketing features. Sitecore is great for content authors. You can go in, you can set up goals, you can trigger them, associate them with pages, you can set up campaigns, but most everything is triggered server side. Not counting JSS, which has its own architecture and its own set of APIs, but we're not able to really leverage them outside the context of JSS easily anyway. So this was actually something I created a while ago as part of the original Sitecore Foundation, and just because I think it's something useful to leverage by itself, I've pulled it apart into its own project here and enhanced it and added a couple of features. So there are a couple of aspects to it. There's the web API, and just to make it easy to understand the REST interface and what you can do, I've actually added Swagger so you can actually see the methods and test them out. So that is available. And we'll talk about each of these methods in depth when I actually show you a test harness page I created for the JavaScript API, because I figure most of you won't be consuming the REST APIs directly. You'll be leveraging the JavaScript API to do some of these things. So to show you that, one of the first things you want to do is actually make sure you have an active session in Sitecore. So all you need to do is really go to your root site. It doesn't really matter what. That just make sure you have the cookie set, because otherwise the test page won't really work because there's no real context. So I'll go through these methods one by one to give you an idea of what's going on. So if get Sitecore events, the idea is to pull down details about the visitor that Sitecore knows, including what events and goals may have been triggered. A great use case is, say you set up goals in Sitecore and you're triggering them on page. Well, maybe you want to let Google know about those goals. So this will allow you to pull those down for the last page and send them. Matter of fact, I also include a segment analytics.js plugin, which is kind of an event service bus that can take a single event and then push it to Google, to Adobe, to really any analytics platform you have. So that's something you may want to look into, although I'm not going to really demo it. There are some details on GitHub, and if you have any questions, you can let me know. So I did provide try it out buttons for each of these. So you can see this is, I mean, it was just a single call, so you just really have an anonymous contact. We don't know who this person is. We just have a contact ID. I can't identify the contact, so if I try that out, I'm not doing any pop-up boxes or anything like that. You can look at console.log if you want to see what's going on or get more feedback than that. But if I try it out, now we have our username and our first name. Now, track interaction. So interactions in Sitecore are pretty much page views. There's not a good way to add an interaction easily, because basically Sitecore, every time it's serving a page, is kind of tracking it in the background. So one of the use cases for this is, say you have more of a rich JavaScript application, and there are states of it that you want to be able to track and see in Path Analyzer. So in order to do that, you actually have to have each of your states or interactions represented by a Sitecore item. So this GUID can actually really be any Sitecore item, but just to make this simpler so that you have a single place where you're managing, and I actually added a folder in the marketing control panel where you can store a type called client-side interactions. So let me just show you that. So you can see in the marketing control panel, there's this client-side interactions, and you can see in here, I have created a sample interaction which installs with the package 7FE, and you can see my test page, 7FE is what it is. So I can try it out. I'm not getting any response, but if I look in Path Analyzer, we'll see that this visitor, after going to the home page, went to this from a Path Analyzer perspective. And these interactions, you actually can tie goals and things to as well, and that will work. Most of these methods require some sort of page ID, and if you don't pass in the page ID, it'll just use the last item requested in that user session. So keep that in mind, especially if you have an application where a visitor may have opened multiple tabs. The easiest thing to do is just make sure you're using a hidden variable with the page ID, and this way you could pass it to avoid those issues. So the next one is track goal. You can really pass in a goal by name or GUID. Um, so we can instant demo. That's one of the out of the box goals in Sitecore. And just to show you it worked, I can click Sitecore events, and now you can see instant demo is there. A page event. So there are really two types of page events, and page events are actually stored not in the marketing control panel, but in system settings analytics. Similar to goal, you can do it by event name or event ID. So page visited was an event, which we get now. Custom events is basically the same as a page event, but you're actually building up an object that can have additional details. So, like internal searches are custom events because they have an event label. So it doesn't have to be a search term. It could be really anything you want to track. Keep in mind, there's no good out of the box way to surface this data in any of the reports. I mean, the search ones handle that automatically, but for anything else, you'll have to do a little bit of extra work to get it to show up, but it does work. I think this will just show me 2-page visited, right? Um, yeah. So outcomes are like goals, but they have dollar values. Marketing lead was one. So I'm not sure if that shows up as a goal. It doesn't, because these are just page events. I mean, that's the other thing. The code I have for this is kind of bare bones. It's just really dealing with a few contact details and things like that. You can always take this project and extend it. Or if you have an idea of having more of a full visitor profile, I'm happy to integrate those changes if you guys want to do a pull request. All right, so that's outcome. And then trigger campaign. So there's a test campaign set up. I think that's just out of the box. And I think when you trigger a campaign, there is an event that is automatically fired. And you can see it actually even translated the campaign name to a campaign ID. But that Sitecore does that. There's nothing I did to do that. And then finally, end session, which will basically end the session and flush everything to XDB. And I want to do that because I would love to be able to go to here, and we can go to Experience Analytics, and we should be able to find, not Experience Analytics, I wanted to go to Experience Profile. Here we go. Here's my first name. This is where I'm doing a majority of my testing. And remember, that's another advantage of having to identify contact. Now, identifying contact is not the same as the login. So if you have something that you can use to identify that session, it may be worth it. Keep in mind, out of the box, Sitecore does not track anonymous visitors, so you won't see this stuff unless you identify the contact. But you can see, here's some of the latest events. We can see that outcome was triggered, that campaign was triggered. The campaign was triggered, but it doesn't say recent campaign, so I'm not 100% sure. Maybe I have some issues, but I mean that's the goal, and it'll stabilize over time if there are issues like that. So that is pretty much it. I mean, the project is on GitHub. There's a initial release. Use it. Let me know if you have any issues. Uses Unicorn. This is kind of the standard Helix approach. Task runner for build options and things like that. Yeah, and that's about it. So the other thing I'd say from script perspective, there's some details on how to do the NLX.js plugin. Something I definitely recommend taking a look. Hopefully this is something you guys can use, and would love to hear some feedback. Thank you.